Have you ever played a game that you wanted to love with every fiber of your being, but it just had one too many things holding it back from being amazing? Well, that game today for me is Sword and Fairy Together Forever. This action RPG has tons of gorgeous environments, dynamic cinematography and cutscenes, and fun combat. However, its numerous bugs and technical limitations hold it back from being a truly incredible game. In broad strokes, Sword and Fairy Together Forever is about the three intertwined realms of demons, deities, and humans. At the heart of the story is the pair Zhiwu and Jingshu. Zhiwu is a mighty warrior from the deity realm hell-bent on defeating the demons. Jingshu is from the human realm and lives in a quiet mountain village. The two inexplicably become linked to one another in a way that I won't spoil. Their goals of warding off vicious beasts and protecting a special child happen to align, so they decide to adventure together. The story is a grand one with a huge cast of characters and a long list of locales you'll visit. The way the story is presented is quite impressive. Together Forever's cutscenes give the game a really high quality feel. There are, however, two big issues that hold the story back. The first is the pacing. Oftentimes you'll sit through long cutscenes only for the game to ask you to go to another location and sit through another long cutscene. This is exacerbated by the fact that Together Forever's voiceover is entirely in Chinese, forcing you to read everything. Normally I don't mind when games have other languages for voiceover, in fact I quite enjoy it, but Together Forever's story segments are so long it can get exhausting to read that much text after a while. And speaking of which, the second thing holding the game's story back is the language barrier. To put it lightly, the localization isn't stellar. Sure, you can understand what the characters are trying to convey, but there's a lot of grammar mistakes here. Usually it's simple things like mixing up the tense, but other times it seemed like the completely wrong word was being used. I had to really stop and think a few times to understand what the characters were trying to say. What makes this particularly difficult at times is the fact that text can sometimes not stay on screen long enough to read fully. All this put together made for a story that I ultimately didn't really care for, which is a shame because I really enjoy art centered around Chinese mythology. For those that can understand Chinese or are more patient than I am, might find more enjoyment out of this story than I did, but I imagine the majority of players won't find it that compelling.
不能让妖怪侵入村子。
At its heart, Sword and Fairy Together Forever is an action RPG. You'll have a party of 4 characters that you can switch between on the fly, all with unique movesets. Zhiwu attacks the slowest but has a powerful array of magical abilities. Jingshu is probably the most balanced fighter with relatively fast melee combos and the ability to summon spirits to come to her aid. Yo is a ranged fighter wielding an elemental crossbow, and Mojing is a caster that can command the elements to do her bidding. Typically in games like this, I find myself gravitating to one character only, but with Together Forever, I found myself switching characters often when the situation called for it. Certain flying enemies, for example, made it impractical to fight with melee characters, so I would inevitably switch to Yo. By the end of the game, Zhiwu way outpaces everyone in damage, so I found myself using him for the last handful of hours. While this is no Bayonetta or Tales game, I felt like the combat was pretty solid. There were times where I wish the animations happened a little faster and special attacks flowed together better, but overall I would say I enjoyed it. The game truly shines though in between story segments when you're free to explore the world and take on side quests. Granted, the side quests are your typical RPG fare, but because the world is so beautiful and the combat is fun, you'll want to exhaust every activity there is to partake in. I absolutely loved gobbling up all the quests in an area and venturing off into the world to complete them all. Admittedly, I do have a weakness for action RPGs with cute female protagonists set in pretty environments. If you don't share the same fondness, you might not be as forgiving of the trite side quests. If those aren't your thing, Together Forever does have a staggering amount of other distractions. The one you're likely to sink the most time into is the collectible card game. It's a relatively simple combination of rock, paper, scissors, and power levels. There are creatures all over the world you can challenge and obtain cards from. There's also a rhythm game where you need to stay on beat with the movement of sticks. Once you understand how it works, it's pretty easy to achieve the highest rank, but there are prizes each time you finish it. There's also plenty of one-off puzzles and mini-games. By the end of the game, I was pretty surprised at how many unique mechanics Together Forever implemented. Now to be clear, the game isn't one seamless open world, but rather it's broken up into large segmented zones. Thankfully, the fast travel time is pretty short on PlayStation 5, so traveling between these locations is never a chore. Once in an environment, you have a lot of freedom to jump on buildings and explore at your leisure. Now, all this praise aside, there are a few quirks with the gameplay. For starters, you do have levels, but it's not very clear when you level up or if you're underleveled. You have to dig way too far, in my opinion, to find your level and the amount of experience you have in the menus. And as dumb as it might be to see enemy levels or other indicators in other games, at least you know where you stand against them. There were so many times where I would enter a new zone and immediately get one-shotted. Another thing is the minimap is kind of off. As you can see, I'm clearly walking on the most obvious path, but the minimap shows that I'm off to the side. This might not seem like a big deal, but when I was exploring or trying to track down something for a side quest, it made it incredibly frustrating to try to figure out where I needed to go. Oh, and one last thing, the developers forgot to change the button icons. At first I thought it was some unique icon to the world, but not until almost the end of the game did I realize this one here was the Y button on the Xbox controller instead of the triangle button. Oops. It's hard to deny that Sword and Fairy Together Forever is a good looking game. The character models and cutscenes animate well, the combat effects look great, and some of the environments are downright stunning. However, here's where the game's biggest issues start to rear their head. While the game does run at 4K on PlayStation 5, the texture work can sometimes look like something out of a PS3 game. Textures can range from decent to just downright bad. This is a shame because there's some great design work being showcased. There's also really bad pop-in. In any big environment, you'll regularly see enemies, NPCs, and other parts of buildings just pop in out of nowhere. This was pretty surprising to see, especially considering I was playing this on a PlayStation 5. Then there are the bugs. Granted, they aren't frequent at all, but they are big and very noticeable. At the beginning of the game, one of the cutscenes audio got super out of sync, off by a good 5 to 10 seconds. Then there was this bug where a character was floating above the table they were supposed to be sitting at. What became clear to me by the end of the game is that the developers' technical abilities weren't able to keep up with their ambition. Considering the last game in the Sword and Fairy series looked like this, which came out in 2015 by the way, the leap forward here is impressive. However, the team clearly has more work to do to clean up their technical shortcomings. On a more positive note, Together Forever has an absolutely beautiful soundtrack. The use of flutes, strings, and drums create a really incredible feel to the game. When I was walking through the various environments set to this incredible music, it was hard not to be amazed. While I liked my time with Sword and Fairy Together Forever, I wanted to love it. The beautiful visuals, fun combat, and stunning music really drew me in. However, the uneven story and bevy of technical issues hold it back from being something truly great. At only $40, I would still recommend this game as you're likely to have fun with it and get at least 20 hours of playtime. But if you can't deal with a little jank, then I might just hold off and wait for the next game in the series. Right now is a pretty packed time for games, and the rest of 2022 is looking just as full. Now to see what JRPGs are coming real soon, be sure to check out this video right here. And if you love JRPGs and haven't already, be sure to subscribe because I have a ton of reviews coming over the next month that you won't want to miss. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.